500 years ago, a man was exiled, tortured, and silenced for revealing truths about power that the ruling class wanted buried forever. His name was Niccolò Machiavelli. They feared his words because he didn't write about how power should work. He wrote about how it actually works. Today, I'm going to share what Machiavelli really taught, stripped of the myths and misunderstandings that have distorted his legacy. This isn't about becoming ruthless or abandoning your values. It's about seeing reality clearly so you can navigate it effectively. The powerful don't want you to understand these principles because an informed population is harder to control. They prefer you believe in fairy tales about meritocracy, fairness, and how hard work alone guarantees success. Meanwhile, they play by completely different rules. By the end of this presentation, you'll understand the hidden mechanisms that govern human behavior, organizational dynamics, and social hierarchies. You'll see why some people rise while others stagnate, despite equal or superior talent. And most importantly, you'll learn how to apply these insights ethically in your own life. But first, let me tell you who Machiavelli really was, because the man and the myth are worlds apart. Niccolò Machiavelli was born in Florence in 1469, during the Renaissance, one of history's most turbulent and creative periods. Florence was a republic, constantly threatened by foreign powers, internal conspiracies, and the ambitions of powerful families. At 29, Machiavelli became second chancellor of the Florentine Republic. For 14 years, he served in government, conducting diplomatic missions, organizing military defenses, and observing how power actually functioned at the highest levels. He didn't theorize from an ivory tower. He learned by watching princes, popes, and politicians up close. Everything changed in 1512 when the Medici family returned to power and abolished the Republic. Machiavelli was fired, imprisoned, and tortured. They suspected him of conspiracy. He was innocent, but that didn't matter. Power doesn't always concern itself with truth. In exile, broken financially and politically, Machiavelli did something remarkable. He wrote. He poured 15 years of observations, insights, and hard-won wisdom into a small book called The Prince. He wrote it partly hoping to win favor with the new rulers, partly to process his experiences, and partly because he genuinely wanted to understand the mechanics of political power. The book was revolutionary because Machiavelli did something scholars had never done before. He separated politics from morality. Not because he was immoral, but because he recognized that political effectiveness and personal virtue operate by different logics. He wrote about what successful leaders actually do, not what philosophers say they should do. The Catholic Church placed The Prince on its index of forbidden books. For centuries, his name became synonymous with evil cunning. People who probably never read him used Machiavellian as an insult. But why? What did he write that was so threatening? The answer is simple. He told the truth about power. And truth, when it contradicts comfortable illusions, is always dangerous to those who benefit from the illusions. Machiavelli wrote, "There is such a gap between how one lives and how one should live that he who neglects what is being done for what should be done will learn his destruction rather than his preservation." This is the foundation of everything else. Most people are taught that the world operates according to clear moral principles. Be honest and you'll be trusted, work hard and you'll be promoted, treat people well and they'll reciprocate. These are comforting beliefs, but observation reveals a more complex reality. The world is filled with honest people who are manipulated, hard workers who are exploited, and kind individuals who are taken advantage of. Meanwhile, some of the most successful people in business, politics, and social hierarchies have mastered the art of appearing virtuous while acting strategically. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty or deception. He was making an observation. If you insist on playing by idealistic rules while everyone else plays by realistic rules, you will lose. Not because you're morally inferior, but because you're strategically naive. Think about your own experiences. How many times have you seen someone less qualified get promoted because they understood office politics better? How often has someone who projects confidence been chosen over someone with actual competence? How frequently do charismatic leaders gain followers despite having questionable track records? This isn't cynicism. It's pattern recognition. The gap between ideals and reality exists in every domain of human activity. Recognizing this gap doesn't require you to abandon your principles. It requires you to be strategic about when and how you apply them. The person who can navigate both worlds, who understands ideals but recognizes realities, has a profound advantage. They can choose which game to play in any situation, rather than being locked into one approach regardless of context. Here's what this means practically. Maintain your ethical core, but develop strategic awareness. Understand that people often say one thing and do another. Watch what people do, not what they say. Pay attention to incentive structures, power dynamics, and hidden agendas. This awareness doesn't corrupt you. It protects you. Machiavelli had a dark but clear-eyed view of human nature. He wrote, "Men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous, and as long as you succeed they are yours entirely. But when danger approaches, they turn away." This sounds harsh, but is it wrong? History is filled with examples of crowds that cheered leaders one day and demanded their execution the next. Friendships that dissolved when one person stopped being useful. Loyalties that evaporated when circumstances changed. Machiavelli wasn't saying every human is terrible. He was saying that humans are predictable in specific ways. We're motivated by self-interest, influenced by fear and hope, and generally more reactive than rational. Understanding this isn't about judging people. It's about predicting behavior. Most people make a critical error. They assume others think like them. If you're loyal, you assume others are loyal. If you're honest, you expect honesty in return. This projection causes endless disappointment and exploitation. Strategic thinking requires a different approach. Assume people will act in their perceived self-interest. Not always, but often enough that you should plan for it. This doesn't mean becoming paranoid or cynical. It means being prepared. When someone offers you something, ask, what do they gain? When someone makes a promise, consider what happens if circumstances change. When someone expresses loyalty, observe whether their actions match their words. These aren't signs of distrust. They're signs of intelligence. Machiavelli also understood that people respect strength more than kindness. This doesn't mean you should be cruel. It means that boundaries, standards, and the willingness to enforce consequences command respect in ways that unlimited flexibility doesn't. People test boundaries constantly, usually unconsciously. They push to see what you'll tolerate. If you tolerate everything, they'll respect nothing. If you maintain clear standards and enforce them consistently, you'll be seen as reliable and strong. This is why effective leaders balance approachability with authority. They're not tyrants, but neither are they pushovers. They understand that respect and fear aren't opposites, they're complementary. The most respected leaders inspire a healthy concern about disappointing them or crossing their boundaries. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince who wants to keep his authority must learn how not to be good, and use that knowledge, or refrain from using it, as necessity requires." This is perhaps his most misunderstood teaching. He's not saying leaders should be evil. He's saying effective leadership sometimes requires actions that wouldn't be considered nice in personal relationships. Consider a CEO who must lay off employees to save the company. A parent who must enforce strict consequences to teach responsibility. A leader who must remove a toxic team member despite their personal liking for that person. These actions aren't good in the simple sense, but they may be necessary. The key word is necessity. Machiavelli distinguished between cruelty that serves a purpose and cruelty for its own sake. He advocated for the former when absolutely necessary, and condemned the latter. Here's what people miss. Refusing to take difficult actions when they're necessary isn't virtue. It's avoidance. The leader who won't fire a destructive employee isn't kind, they're weak, and their weakness harms everyone else on the team. The person who won't set boundaries isn't compassionate, they're enabling dysfunction. Real power isn't about dominating others. It's about having options. When you depend on others' approval, you're powerless. When you've built skills, resources, relationships, and reputation, you have choices. Power is the freedom to act according to your judgment rather than others' demands. This is why Machiavelli emphasized being self-sufficient. Don't rely on others' loyalty if you can avoid it. Don't depend on circumstances remaining favorable. Build capabilities that work in multiple contexts. Develop relationships with diverse people. Create options for yourself. The most powerful position is having something valuable that others need, while needing relatively little from specific individuals. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being independent. The person who needs nothing from you specifically has no reason to defer to you. The person who needs what you offer must negotiate on your terms. Pay attention to power dynamics in every situation. Who has what others need? Who depends on whom? What are the actual sources of leverage? Understanding these dynamics doesn't require you to exploit them ruthlessly, but ignorance of them ensures you'll be exploited by those who do understand them. One of Machiavelli's most valuable insights was about anticipation. He wrote, "The Romans, foreseeing troubles, dealt with them at once, and even allowed a war to break out, rather than wait to avoid it." Strategic thinking means addressing problems when they're small and manageable rather than waiting until they become crises. Most people avoid difficult decisions, hoping problems will resolve themselves. They rarely do. They grow. Think about this in your own life. That difficult conversation you're avoiding? It gets harder the longer you wait. That skill gap you know you have? It widens as others progress. That toxic relationship you tolerate? It consumes more of your energy over time. Strategic thinkers make decisions before they're forced to make them. They act while they still have options rather than waiting until circumstances leave them with only bad choices. This requires seeing beyond the immediate situation. When you make a decision, trace its consequences 3 moves ahead. What doors does this open? What doors does it close? How might others respond? What flexibility do you want to maintain? Machiavelli observed that successful leaders always had backup plans. They never depended on a single strategy, alliance, or approach working out. When their preferred plan succeeded, excellent. When it failed, they had alternatives ready. This level of preparation isn't paranoia. It's professionalism. Athletes have game plans and contingencies. Businesses have strategic alternatives. Military leaders have multiple operational plans. Why would you navigate your life with less foresight than organizations bring to their planning? Here's a practical framework. Before any important decision, ask 3 questions. First, what's the best case outcome, and what would I need to do to achieve it? Second, what's the worst case outcome, and how would I handle it? Third, what's the most likely outcome, and am I prepared for it? This thinking style transforms decision-making. You stop being reactive and become proactive. You stop being surprised by predictable problems and start preventing them. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start shaping them. The most successful people I've studied aren't lucky. They're prepared. When opportunities arise, they're ready to capitalize. When setbacks occur, they have responses planned. This preparation creates what looks like luck to outside observers, but is actually strategic foresight. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." This is one of his most important observations. Your reputation matters more than your reality in most situations. People make decisions about you based on limited information, filtered through their biases and needs. How you're perceived determines what opportunities come your way, how others treat you, and what you can accomplish. This doesn't mean being fake. It means being intentional about the image you project. Every successful leader, brand, and organization understands that managing perception is part of their responsibility. Consider how people form impressions. They observe small signals, how you dress, speak, and carry yourself. They note how you handle pressure, treat others, and respond to challenges. They remember whether you deliver on promises. All these data points create a narrative about who you are. If you're unconscious about these signals, you're letting others write your story based on random observations. If you're conscious, you can ensure the signals you send align with the reality you want to communicate. This isn't manipulation. It's communication. A job interview is managed perception. You emphasize relevant strengths. A first date is managed perception. You present your best self. A business pitch is managed perception. You highlight value propositions. Machiavelli understood that appearances often matter more than reality because most people lack the time, access, or interest to discover who you really are. They rely on surface-level indicators to categorize you. The strategic approach is to control those indicators. If you want to be seen as competent, consistently deliver results and communicate them clearly. If you want to be seen as reliable, keep commitments visibly. If you want to be seen as confident, project calm self-assurance. But here's the critical balance. Your public image must be grounded in real capabilities. You can't fake competence indefinitely. Eventually, you'll be tested, and reality will be exposed. The goal isn't to deceive people into thinking you're something you're not. It's to ensure people accurately perceive what you actually are. Many capable people fail to advance because they assume their good work will speak for itself. It won't. If nobody knows about your accomplishments, they might as well not exist. Strategic visibility isn't vanity. It's professionalism. Document your achievements. Communicate your contributions. Make sure the right people know about your capabilities. This isn't bragging if it's truthful. It's ensuring your reality matches your perception. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." This metaphor captures one of his most sophisticated insights. Different situations require different approaches. Sometimes you need strength and directness. Sometimes you need cunning and flexibility. The key is knowing which to deploy when. The lion represents direct power, the ability to face threats head-on, stand your ground, and use strength when necessary. The fox represents cunning intelligence, the ability to recognize hidden dangers, navigate complex situations, and solve problems cleverly. Most people default to one approach. They're always aggressive or always accommodating. Always confrontational or always diplomatic. This inflexibility limits their effectiveness because life presents varied challenges requiring varied responses. The strategic person develops both capabilities and chooses contextually. When dealing with a direct threat from a weaker position, don't try to be the lion, you'll lose. Be the fox. Find clever solutions, alternative paths, or ways to neutralize the threat indirectly. When you have strength and the situation calls for clarity, don't be overly clever. Be the lion. State your position clearly, enforce your boundaries, and don't apologize for standing firm. Here are practical examples. In negotiations, start as the fox. Gather information, understand the other side's needs, identify creative solutions. But when it's time to close, be the lion. State your terms clearly and hold your ground. In conflicts, be the fox first. Understand what's really driving the disagreement, find common ground, explore win-win solutions. But if you're dealing with someone acting in bad faith, be the lion. Set clear boundaries and enforce consequences. In leadership, be the fox when navigating office politics, building coalitions, and managing complex personalities. Be the lion when making difficult decisions, standing up for your team, or confronting ethical violations. The mistake most people make is bringing the wrong approach to the situation. They try to be clever when strength is called for, appearing weak or indecisive. Or they try to be forceful when subtlety would work better, creating unnecessary conflicts. Developing both capacities requires different kinds of work. Building your lion means developing real capabilities, building resources, and becoming genuinely strong in your domain. Building your fox means studying human nature, learning persuasion, and understanding strategic thinking. The most effective people I've observed can shift seamlessly between modes. They're formidable when necessary but diplomatic when useful. They can be tough in negotiations but collaborative in partnerships. They know when to push and when to pull. Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to act and repent than not to act and regret." One of the most common ways people lose power is through indecision. They overanalyze, seek perfect information, and wait for ideal conditions. Meanwhile, others act, learn, and advance. Strategic action doesn't mean recklessness. It means making decisions with imperfect information and adjusting based on results. The person who waits for perfect certainty never moves because certainty rarely exists in complex situations. Machiavelli observed that fortune favors the bold. Not because the universe rewards courage, but because action creates information, opportunities, and momentum that passivity never generates. When you act, even if the action proves suboptimal, you learn. You discover what works and what doesn't. You generate feedback. You create new options. The person who never acts never learns. This is particularly important in competitive environments. While you're deliberating, others are moving. They're building relationships, developing skills, seizing opportunities. Your perfect plan, if it ever materializes, may arrive too late to matter. The strategic approach is to make the best decision you can with available information, act decisively, and remain flexible enough to adjust as you learn more. This is far superior to endless planning that never leads to action. Consider how successful entrepreneurs operate. They don't wait until every detail is perfect. They launch minimum viable products, gather customer feedback, and iterate rapidly. The first version is rarely optimal, but it's real, and reality teaches faster than speculation. This principle applies everywhere. Want to improve your public speaking? Stop reading books and start speaking. Want to build a business? Stop planning and start selling. Want to develop a skill? Stop researching and start practicing. Machiavelli also understood the power of commitment. When you make a decision and commit fully, you mobilize resources, focus energy, and signal confidence. Hesitant, half-hearted efforts rarely succeed because they don't generate enough momentum to overcome obstacles. But here's the balance. Decisiveness doesn't mean stubbornness. Act boldly, but remain willing to adjust based on feedback. The goal is rapid iteration. Make a decision, implement it, observe results, and adjust, not rigid adherence to plans that aren't working. People respect decisiveness even when they disagree with specific decisions. They lose respect for endless vacillation. A leader who makes clear decisions creates clarity and allows others to align or oppose. A leader who can't decide creates confusion and frustration. In your own life, identify where you're stuck in analysis paralysis. What decision are you avoiding? What action are you postponing? What would you do if you had to choose today? Often, making any reasonable decision is better than making no decision. Here's a crucial distinction Machiavelli understood. There's a difference between real power and perceived power, and you need both. Real power comes from capabilities, resources, knowledge, relationships, and track records. It's what you can actually do, the problems you can solve, and the value you create. This is the foundation. Perceived power comes from reputation, confidence, presence, and how others view your capabilities. It determines what opportunities come your way and how much latitude others give you. Many people focus exclusively on one. They either build real capabilities but fail to communicate them, remaining unrecognized and underutilized. Or they focus on image without substance, eventually being exposed when tested. The strategic approach is building both simultaneously. Develop real skills and capabilities. This gives you genuine confidence and ensures you can deliver when opportunities arise. But also learn to communicate your value, project confidence, and manage your reputation. Think about this dynamic in your field. Who gets opportunities? Usually not the most qualified person in isolation, but the qualified person who is also known, respected, and perceived as capable. Two people with equal skills rarely have equal success. The one who understands perception management advances faster. This isn't unfair. It's reality. Organizations can't read minds. They rely on signals. If you don't send clear signals about your capabilities, they'll never know what you can do. Here's the practical application. Every time you complete a significant project, ensure relevant people know about it. Not through bragging, but through clear communication. Document your achievements. Share insights you've learned. Contribute visibly to important conversations. Build your skills constantly, but also build your reputation. Deliver results, but make sure people see them. Solve problems, but communicate how you solved them. This isn't vanity, it's ensuring reality and perception align. Here's what Machiavelli really understood, the insight that ties everything together. Life is a strategic game, and most people don't realize they're playing. They think if they just do good work, be honest, and treat people well, everything will work out. These are virtuous behaviors, but they're insufficient for navigating complex social hierarchies, organizational politics, and competitive environments. The people who succeed aren't necessarily more talented. They recognize they're in a game with rules, players, stakes, and strategies. They study the game, understand its mechanics, and play skillfully. This doesn't mean abandoning ethics. Games have ethical and unethical ways to play. Chess is a game, but you don't cheat. Business is a game, but you can play with integrity. Politics is a game, but you can pursue public good while understanding political realities. The key is seeing the game clearly. Every organization has an informal power structure beyond the official hierarchy. Every social group has unspoken rules about who has influence and why. Every field has gatekeepers, networks, and invisible dynamics that determine success. When you understand you're in a game, you can make strategic decisions. Who should you build relationships with? What skills give you leverage? How should you position yourself? Where should you invest your energy? The people who act like they're not in a game, who refuse to engage with political realities, who ignore power dynamics, who insist the world should work differently, don't escape the game. They just play it poorly. Machiavelli's gift was showing us the game clearly. He removed the comfortable illusions and showed how power actually functions. This knowledge doesn't corrupt you. It empowers you. You can choose to play ethically, but you can't choose not to play. You're already in the game. The only question is whether you play consciously or unconsciously, skillfully or clumsily, effectively or ineffectively. Here's what I want you to understand. Embracing strategic thinking doesn't mean becoming manipulative or cruel. It means becoming effective. It means understanding reality so you can navigate it successfully while maintaining your integrity. The most powerful people aren't those who abandon their values. They're those who pursue their values strategically, understanding that good intentions without effectiveness accomplish nothing. Machiavelli wasn't teaching evil. He was teaching reality. And in reality, the person who sees the game clearly, understands human nature accurately, thinks strategically, and acts decisively has a profound advantage over those who don't. The dark truth they don't want you to see isn't that the world is evil. It's that the world operates by different rules than you were taught. And once you see those real rules, you can't unsee them. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you use it to pursue what matters to you more effectively? Will you apply these insights ethically to create the life and impact you want? Or will you reject reality and continue wondering why others keep getting ahead? 500 years ago, Machiavelli was silenced for telling these truths. Today, you have the choice to learn from them. The game continues. The only question is how you'll play.